thank you to the Athens Defense Summit for hosting this important conversation. Basil, great job. Mr. Karamanlis, thank you. And as the world finds itself in chaos, this is an amazing conversation to have with a person who I've had the privilege of working firsthand. We still have a lot of work to do together, but I can tell you, hopefully this is like a little preview of your memoirs, which I'm signing. I'm taking the signing rights from it. There is nobody, and I've witnessed it in Washington, D.C. Deputy Minister Papadopoulou started in a tumultuous period at the end of the Trump administration, faced COVID crisis, faced an Aegean crisis, faced a Ukraine war, the Gaza war, now managing a region, and somehow has helped Greece come out stronger, but on the front lines of a really chaotic period. The Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. Minister, you've lived in interesting times. But let's talk about some of those interesting times. You've served in several key posts during the duration of the Mitsotakis government. Diplomatic advisor, ambassador to the United States, now deputy foreign minister. As I said, you've been on the front lines of chaotic developments, wars, crises, and seismic changes in regional and world order. My personal estimation, as I just said, is that Greece has come out stronger, has navigated these periods well. Can you tell me how Greece has approached this chaotic international environment?
Thank you, Andy. Thanks the International Defense Summit for inviting me and having me here as a speaker in this panel. This is a crisis which is unprecedented. I have 45 years of service in the Greek Foreign Ministry. I've seen a lot in these 45 years, but never before an accumulation of crises that ends up into the breakdown of the world we knew and into the beginning of a process to create a new world architecture. How Greece manages that? First of all, we try, and I think this is a constant in Greek foreign policy, we try to combine sticking to the principles and values with realistic evaluation of the circumstances on the ground. Greece is not a big power, and it's a country that uses mostly soft power in promoting its interests. The fact that Greece is Hellenic civilization, which is the basis of Western civilization, and it's the basis of whatever architecture we have presently. The fact that we have Greek communities around the world who are the best ambassadors. The fact that Greece is welcome. We don't create tensions. We always go as friends, as partners. So all of this helps in our quest to promote our interests without offending anybody, without trying not to miscalculate the circumstances, but on the other hand, not to be a cynical country that knows no boundaries and a country that doesn't respect any values and principles. Right now, of course, we belong to the UN, like all of us, and it's very important that we uphold the UN Charter. Is it perfect, the UN? Of course not. Nothing is perfect. It's man-made is perfect. Is there anything we have as an alternative for all countries of the world to get together and tell what they think, try to find justice to the extent that there is justice in the international environment, but there is some justice. No, there is no other forum. The UN is indispensable. So Greece invests a lot in our participation in the UN, and the last 2 years we've been also an elected member of the Security Council. And being an elected member of the Security Council, we try to play the role of a bridge, somebody who listens, somebody who doesn't take strong stances against anybody's ideas, but on the other hand, somebody who fights for the UN Charter and its implementation. At the same
Can I interrupt here, because I hear it and I hear common themes over your 45 career. You've always had strong communities. You've always stood up for the UN Charter, and maybe it's humility on your part, but during your tenure and this government's tenure, it seems they did more with those resources than it have ever been done before.
Before it was easy. Now it's not so easy.
Yeah.
We always wanted to do that, and it was easy to do that. It was something everybody expected, but now it's not easy.
But you're still doing it.
Difficult.
But you're still doing it.
Yes, because we have the moral stance, and we have the moral power to do it. On the other hand, we are members of the European Union.
Yes.
And we are members of NATO. But this is confined to the European continent. And within NATO and the European Union, we try to stand by the same principles. Sometimes, yes, you have to take into consideration, as I said, the circumstances on the ground. But you never take your eyes off the goal. Because if you don't protect the goal for others, who is going to protect it for you?
Yeah.
It's, when we say it, it sounds like you write a book or a thesis. Yeah. It's very difficult to do it. And the fact that right now Greece is a very trusted interlocutor of the entire Arab world, and we've seen a series of Arab leaders coming to Athens to say thank you for our stance. And of course we have this strategic partnership with Israel, and the fact that we stand by our European allies when it comes to the defense of Ukraine. And we try to do everything at the same time. It's balancing on a tightrope with the constant danger to fall one way or another, but this is what we should do. And I think it's a testament to the Greek foreign policy, to the leadership and the foreign ministry, that so far we managed to do it.
I have found it extremely remarkable because, as you said, you've stayed consistent with your commitments to NATO, EU, the UN, and preserving the best part of the world as you knew it, or tried to preserve that, but also shifting to an age of trilaterals. We think of it, we have trilaterals and we take them for granted as if it was something, and people don't remember there was a time when there was none of that, and Greece is in the center of all of those, and new institutions like the East Med Gas Forum, and before October 7th there were considerations of expanding the Abraham Accords to European countries, including Greece. So I'm just still, the way you have balanced in this government, and you personally, the new world order and the old world order is amazing. But the point of this panel is how we take these diplomatic initiatives and that have had soft power components and energy components and add a defense and security layer. I think you personally were in the center of a pretty important reference point, and that was a framework piece of legislation, landmark, the U.S. Defense and Interparliamentary Partnership Act, which was in effect the U.S.-Greece Defense and Interparliamentary Partnership, which was really in effect the East Med Act 2, but named after Greece for the bicentennial. You also helped implement the first East Med Act, the East Med Security and Energy Partnership Act, and negotiate the MDCA. This layered on defense, these 3 points layered on defense and security components onto existing energy and diplomatic relationships. Do you think this is a model for going on?
We have to separate.
Yeah.
It's one thing, our relationship with the US and the 3+1 schemes, and it's another thing, the trilaterals. At some point, they intersect, but they're 2 different stories. The trilaterals have started a long time ago, not during the crisis, before the crisis, because in the scheme of things, we believe that regional cooperation is very important. It is not against the EU, it's not against the UN, it's not against NATO, it's not against anybody, it's not against a third country. It's in favor of closer regional cooperation and integration. So we have a series of trilaterals. Apart from the Israel, it's a 3+1, Israel, Cyprus, Greece plus US, we have Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Greece, Cyprus, Jordan, Greece, Cyprus, Lebanon, Greece, Cyprus, Palestine, Greece, Cyprus, Serbia, Greece, Cyprus, Armenia. So it's a series of trilaterals. And we were in the process of expanding the trilaterals, and the crisis took place. So all this is a little going backwards. It stopped. Not stopped, take a break. And we see how it's going to move forward. So the trilateral is a bigger scheme of cooperation and regional integration. The relationship with the US is a different story. For Greece, the transatlantic relationship and membership in the European Union are the two main pillars of our foreign policy. And we don't choose the one against the other. They're equally important, and we're not going to betray the one for the other. The US is a strategic partner. This has been for quite some time. We had MDCA, then we have 2019, the first act of Congress, then 2021, if I'm not mistaken, the second Greece-US partnership. Now there is another piece of legislation that we're going, maybe you are going to refer later, that it's in the pipeline, which builds upon the two previous pieces of legislation. And this is part of the strategic content of our relationship. The relationship between Greece and the US is not necessarily the 3+1. 3+1 is part of it. A very important part, of course it's a very important part, but not all of it. And we invested a lot, and we're going to continue investing a lot, because the area where we are located is very important for the US, and it's proven over and over. Then it has bi-communal and bipartisan support in the US. Of course, it has not only bipartisan, and it has a support of almost every political party in Greece. So I would say it represents the absolute majority of the Greek political world. So it's something on which we have built, and we will continue to build our defense and security. And this is not something separate from the European Union, because you have heard a lot of times, and now it's a big discussion, about bigger European participation in the defense of Europe and European defense within NATO, so it's a lot of discussion. So I dare say with some pride that we're the front runners in that. We started this cooperation and this defense, deepening of defense cooperation with the US, but also with a great share of Greek participation, not depending, but as true partners to the US, long before this became the norm in the rest of Europe. And of course, the 3+1, it's an integral part, but we have to remember the 3+1 didn't start as in the defense sector. It started in the energy sector. Of course, defense means a lot of things. It's not only military defense. This is probably the last. It's energy, it's security, food security, climate, civil protection. Security is something much bigger. It's malign actors, how to deal with them. It's a huge array of issues. And this 3+1 cooperation started with all the other sectors, and it's been built stone by stone, step by step, to become something really important, really deep, and we hope that as time goes by, even deeper, especially with the new piece of legislation.
But even before that, look, it was one of Greece's great successes, I think, in the last several years, of not narrowly, especially in the United States, not narrowly defining its interests as just bilateral or Greco-Turkish, but as regional. 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, nobody used the term Eastern Mediterranean in the United States. Now there are 3 pieces of legislation with Eastern Mediterranean in it. There's an East Med strategy in the State Department. There are think tanks with East Med programs. And these legislation, like you said, small things. For example, in the US-Greece Act, it put Cyprus in the IMET program for the first time. Being able to even within Europe, having allies like Greece and Cyprus have access to the same Pentagon programs, the same excess defense articles, makes compatibility easier. But since you talked about the next piece of legislation, that piece of legislation, the East Med Gateway Act, has to do with the IMEC corridor. Now, some people may be not familiar with the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, and it's still very early in that stage. It's conception more than creation. Can you just give us a brief, what is Greece's vision for this corridor?
IMEC, again, started before the crisis in Iran.
Yeah.
Talking about IMEC started when I was ambassador in Washington,
Yeah.
I think. When we saw, as we saw the great power competition taking more and more ground between China and the US and China. So we saw that there are two routes for international trade, the land route and the sea route. And of course, Greece being a seafarer nation, we took more initiatives in this domain. And through a lot of discussions by many partners, not only by Greece, this idea of a corridor uniting trade corridor, basically trade at the time, uniting India, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, and then Cyprus, Greece, and maybe another European country, all the way to Europe, started being formulated, but also started taking hold that this is something worth exploring. Not only because it's a very valid alternative trade route, we have to remember up to that time we had the land route promoted by China. It's the Silk Road, the old Silk Road. So there was no alternative. Not only this emerged as an alternative to international trade, but also as a great means of regional harmonization and cooperation. And this coincided with Abraham Accords, which go hand in hand, because exactly this will lead to eventually, when everything's said and done, to a great regional cooperations, which is all what we all want. Put aside the difference and find a way to cooperate and exist side by side. Of course, now this has taken, with the war in Iran and everything, has taken a new life, because now it's not only about trade, it's about transportation, it's about energy, it encompasses everything. It's a very costly project, and it's a time-consuming project. But in the long run, this is the only way forward. And what is very important is that it has the full backing of the US, and this new piece of legislation proves that.
Well, let's get to the piece of legislation, because there has been some talk today about isolationism, but now you have Congress, which provided the leadership in the previous two pieces of legislation, saying, no, we're prioritizing in a bipartisan, bicameral matter, and seemingly even overwhelming bipartisan matter. This, not policy shift, but they want to codify, they want to make law the U.S. commitment to IMEC. You went through two historic pieces of legislation. How do you see this piece of legislation?
I think it's the culmination. I think maybe there will be more in the future, but it goes step by step, because this one is more focused. It has IMEC, it speaks about corridors, it proves that this have the full backing of the US. It's more, leaving aside the strategic discussion, it was more general, then it became more focused. Now it's becoming even more focused and project-oriented, which is very important. So I think that they create a big chain with different links. And I always said to people in Greece, everybody that speaks Greece, that should not see or interpret the US as a monolithic decision-making country. There are many factors that lead to the decision-making process. Of course, it's the administration, the executive, which is very normal, but also it's Congress, it's the press, it's think tanks. Everything participates in a long process that leads to to different directions of US foreign policy. What is very interesting, like now, and especially with this piece of legislation, is that the US, yes, of course there is a pivot to Pacific. It's understandable. China is the biggest challenge. The focus will be on the Pacific. But even within this environment, the US understands and values the strategic importance of Eastern Mediterranean. It was always valuable, but now even today, under the present circumstances, the US highlights that it's strategically important for them, let alone for the region. And that if they want to face, as a big power that they are, the challenges of a rising competitor, they have to invest in the Eastern Mediterranean and the greater Middle East, because this is the area through which all routes move up and down. And this is very important for Greece, very important, because we're the northern end of this Eastern Mediterranean and greater Middle East corridor. We're the gateway to Europe. And this is something that we have invested a lot as a country, as a government, and we will continue to invest because this is the way forward. Greece is a European country and will continue to be a European country. There is no Europe without Greece. I remember that was said by an Italian colleague of mine during the times of discussion, maybe Greece stays in the Euro or no, and it was said in the context of Brussels and this debate that there is no Europe without Greece, and of course Greece is Europe. But at the same time, the beauty of the Greek foreign policy is that it can have branches that unite the greater Middle East, Northern Africa, to Europe. And this is what we try to exploit in a good way, that we become a bridge, not someone that disconnects, but someone that connects everybody.
So, but that also depends on, it takes two to tango, right? And one of the things we're seeing in the global south is there are real divisions, and we see it with the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And now you're seeing one camp, Saudi, Pakistan, Turkey, another camp, India, UAE, Israel, Greece. Is there a risk because of the Pakistan-India dynamic between what's becoming increasingly a revanchist, again, at least in rhetoric, Turkey, that this what would be purely a trade or soft power corridor has to more quickly develop some security elements to it?
I will be more reluctant to use the word camps, because the dynamics in the Middle East shift a lot and very fast. The war in Iran took the genie out of the bottle. So a lot of forces that were contained, now they're out in full play, and we see them. Before we talk about alliances as camps, it will be a long time. Everything is shifting and nothing is permanent. One thing that all of us understand, or eventually all of us will understand, is that you don't change your neighbors, you don't change your region, and you cannot live in peace if your neighbor is not living in the same conditions of peace. There is room for everybody. There is no question about that. Thank God there is a lot of demands in today's world, and everybody can be accommodated. I'm afraid it will be some time before we manage to find a new balance in the Middle East, and before the Arab countries and Iran and Israel and the Palestinians will find a way of peaceful coexistence. It will be some, and it's a war right now, so it will be some time, and that might delay the project, but also it might expedite the project. Because if you want to alleviate the tensions, you use economic incentives, especially in a region that is very rich, but right now feels the repercussions of a war. I don't know how this thing is going to work out as a process. I'm sure how it's going to work out as a final result. A balance will be found. And this balance will not be against anybody, because then it will not be a balance. It will be imbalance and the prelude to another round. So we don't want that. And this is what Greece is trying to do, not to belong to camps, but to be an interlocutor with everybody.
Let's talk about process, because again, having a lot of conversations in the security element over the last decade depended overwhelmingly on the United States. We see, if not a complete withdrawal, some significant changes. You talked about the Indo-Pacific theater. It seemed like up until now, and especially in the last administration, they thought the competition with China was worldwide. There wasn't only a competition in Indo-Pacific. Now it seems, at least the Pentagon thinks the Indo-Pacific is a separate theater from Greece. Every time there was, in the crises in the early part of the decade, the U.S. would send an aircraft carrier or a warship to kind of give a signal to Turkey. Can we get through this transition period without the U.S. playing a forward defense role? Does the U.S. have to provide for the next set of diplomatic initiatives, IMEC specifically, some type of diplomatic and security cover the way it did for the early European Union? And while you're answering that question, I'd like to, if you can, address, because we had this conversation about IMEC a few weeks ago at another unnamed conference, but the Indian interlocutor from ORF said, I'd rather the U.S. stay far away. We don't trust the U.S. So the U.S. historically played a stabilizing role. Some key actors are seeing it as an unstable force now. Where does it leave the short term of this diplomatic initiative?
I cannot give you a definite answer how things will look like, but I can pinpoint to the elements that will formulate the likely outcome. Number one, you cannot have a world competitor and limit the competition in one area, because it's not a military competition. It's who controls energy resources, who controls precious minerals, who controls war routes. So it's a very complicated issue, and it plays around the world. And we've seen from President Trump, he made very clear that the Americans, a revival of the Monroe Doctrine, the Americans, U.S. influence in the American continent, or continents both, is not to be disputed, it's not to be challenged. And of course, you heard the President of China during the visit of President Trump saying, making very sure that Taiwan is off limits as an issue. So you see the framework put, that yes, it's global, but still there are areas. Number two, Europe, it's normal, and I want to say that. The world in 2026 is not the world of 1948 or 1950. Europe is not destroyed. Europe is rich. Russia is not a superpower, it's a regional power. The US has another challenger, because in 1948, China was not a challenger. It's normal that the priorities will shift. And it's normal that the US will ask for more European participation in the defense of Europe. So far, it's understandable. How the balance is going between US-European participation in the defense of Europe, how this balance is going to be formulated is an issue up for discussion. And this is under discussion right now. One thing also that is for sure is that Europe, even if they invest everything that they need to invest in defense, it will take time to have the capabilities to secure the defense of Europe. Not only when it comes to factories, but also mainly because of technology. It will take years to reach the level of technology that will make us feel comfortable that we can defend ourselves. So we need the American umbrella participation, and this percentage of participation is going to change gradually. And Europe has to be more and more responsible about its own defense. These are facts. You cannot dispute them. So when it comes to the Middle East, it's very important for a million reasons. And I know there are a lot of discussion about countries in the Middle East, about the level of US commitment to their security. Nobody disputes the level of commitment of the US to Israel's security. But in the end, I think even the Gulf countries or Saudi Arabia will need to have this discussion with the US, because the US has a challenger now, but still their military, technological, and economic power is without any competition. So there are issues on the table that we see how they play out, what decisions we make, and we will see the outcome as time goes by.
Well, Minister, thank you for this fascinating discussion. Thank you for having this, giving us a front row seat over the years on these dynamic developments. And I'm actually looking forward to next year having this conversation and see how everything has changed, because I agree with you, everything will shift under our feet over the next 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you.